Welcome, welcome into this day with Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. As our welcome today, I'm going to read a poem by Norwegian poet Rolf Jacobsen called Just Delicate Needles. It's so delicate, the light, and there's so little of it. The dark is huge. Just delicate needles, the light, in an endless night. And it has such a long way to go through such desolate space. So let's be gentle with it. Cherish it. So it will come again in the morning, we hope. My name is Liesl Slabaugh, and I'm a member of the board here at QUUF. Nice to meet you too. As we gather, I acknowledge that the water, the land, and the shorelines here in Port Townsend are the traditional homes of the S'Klallam and Chemakum people. We honor and acknowledge our indigenous members and neighbors, and we help to restore and sustain their homelands. If you're visiting today, I offer a special welcome and invite you to join us for refreshments and conversation after the service in the fellowship hall. We have a newcomers table near the patio door out here in the lobby where you can find greeters ready to answer every and all of your questions. We welcome everyone here today, this morning. We're so glad you're here. We're especially glad to welcome Reverend Barry Andrews, who joins us from his home on Bainbridge Island. He is Minister Emeritus of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation at Shelter Rock, Manhasset, New York. He writes and teaches not as a theologian or academic, but as a minister and spiritual seeker within the Unitarian Universalist religious tradition. His faith and spiritual practice have been shaped by an ever-deepening appreciation of the ideas and examples of the writers, activists, and spiritual practitioners of the Transcendentalist movement, including Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, and Margaret Fuller. Looking forward to hearing from you. One announcement today, our lovely flower arrangement was donated by Mary Riggin, thank you, Mary, in celebration of all parents. Yay, parents. Let us settle our minds and calm our hearts.
In celebration of Hanukkah, I offer these opening words from the Bethel congregation in Sudbury, Massachusetts. We gather in the chill of winter solstice, finding warmth from each other, nourishing hope where reason fails. Grateful for small miracles, we rejoice in the wonder of light and darkness, in the daring of hope. So may it be. Oh, okay. In this holiday season, throughout the year to come, and always in our lives, may we know that we are loved, may we share the love we have, and may we be the love we wish to see.
We light the third candle for love, for the people we love and the people who love us, for the way love holds us just the way we are, and for the way it calls us forward into new ways of being. We light this candle for love.
And now for our opening hymn.
Mountains, hills, and pastures Good morning, everyone. My name is Beau, hello, and I am the Director of Family Ministry here. For our Time for All Ages, because we are going to keep the kids in here for the lighting of the menorah after the Time for All Ages, I'm going to have everyone stay in their seats for this one, but we do have, Olivia and Molly are going to be passing out a basket full of dreidels for all the kids in the congregation, so keep your eyes out, and yeah, y'all can just come up the center aisle and pass them in all the rows. So this story is called Jeremy's Dreidel, and this is by Ellie Gelman and illustrated by Maria Mola. Did that work? Yes, fancy. Jeremy read the poster at the Jewish Community Center, then added his name to the sign-up sheet. The poster said Dreidel Workshop, Monday at 4 p.m. When he arrived at the art room on Monday, Jeremy recognized Abby, who used to be in his carpool. She was carrying a box of paper towel tubes and old magazines. David, a friend from swimming class, was looking through a book. "Look at this," he called to Jeremy. "It's a black and white top that turns colors when you spin it. Do you think I can make a dreidel like that?" "Sure you can," said a friendly voice. "I'm Miriam, your workshop leader." "Before we start, what do you know about dreidels?" Miriam asked. Adam spoke first. "It's a top we spin on Hanukkah that has 4 Hebrew letters on it. They stand for a great miracle happened here, there." "That's right," Miriam smiled. "Hanukkah celebrates the victory of the small Maccabee army over the huge army of Antiochus. That was a miracle." "There was another miracle," said Jacob. "When the Maccabees lit the temple menorah, a tiny jar of oil lasted for 8 whole days. That's why we light candles for 8 days." "That's right," said Miriam. "Now, let's see what you all brought." Abby emptied her bag. "I want to make my dreidel from recycled materials," she said. Jacob had brought an old music box to make a singing dreidel. Matthew wanted to use a rubber ball so his dreidel would bounce. "What do you need for your dreidel?" Miriam asked Jeremy. "Just clay," he said. Do you want to look through my science book for a more interesting idea?" David asked. "No, thanks," Jeremy replied, as he returned from the supply closet with a lump of gray clay. "I have a great idea already. My dreidel is a surprise for someone." Jeremy began rolling and pounding and softening the clay. David tried to keep his mind on sanding his wood, but he couldn't help looking over at Jeremy. He wondered what kind of surprise someone could make from a lump of clay. Soon, Adam became curious, too. He peeked over Jeremy's shoulder. "Look at this," he called out, and a group gathered around Jeremy as he carefully molded tiny dots onto one side of his dreidel. "What's that?" asked Jacob. "A secret code?" Jeremy looked up. The dots are called Braille. It's a way of reading for people who can't see, so they feel them instead." "Who do you know who is blind?" Adam asked Jeremy. "It's for my dad," Jeremy answered. "But your family doesn't have a guide dog," said Abby. "Not all blind people have them," Jeremy answered. "My dad uses a cane so he doesn't bump into anything, and he also has a tiny GPS that tells him when to turn right or left in a new place." "How can he help you with your homework?" wondered Orit. "The same as any dad," explained Jeremy. "Only with some fancy equipment, he uses a laptop with tiny pegs that pop up and down to make the Braille letters, and his cell phone reads messages to him." He also loves to read. Sometimes he reads in Braille, and sometimes he listens to audiobooks. "He always says hi to me. How does he know who I am when I come over?" David asked. "My dad knows all my friends' voices, and he's a really good listener." And at that moment, Jeremy was relieved when Miriam said it was time to put the art supplies away. He didn't want to answer any more questions. On Wednesday, Miriam made an announcement. "The art department wants to put some of your dreidels in the lobby showcase, but there is only room for 3, so they decided on Jacob's musical dreidel, Abby's environmentally friendly dreidel, and Jeremy's Braille dreidel." Abby and Jacob beamed as the others congratulated them, but Jeremy slid down in his seat. "What's wrong, Jeremy?" asked Miriam, surprised at his reaction. "You still don't understand," he said. "My dad can't see my dreidel, and if it's locked behind glass, he won't be able to play with it either." The room was quiet, and then Abby said, "Jeremy is right. Why do we need to put our dreidels in a showcase? Dreidels are meant to be played with. Let's put up posters inviting people to join us in a dreidel game instead." That Sunday, families gathered at the JCC for the Hanukkah celebration. They enjoyed latkes and jelly donuts made by the cooking class. The drama club put on a play about Judah Maccabee, and the choir sang Hanukkah songs. The dreidel table was busy as people picked up the instruction sheets and joined in the games. Babies pulled the string on Jacob's dreidel to hear the music. Children sat in a circle around Abby's recycled dreidel, and Jeremy sat playing with his father, smiling proudly as kids and grown-ups took turns playing with his Braille dreidel. And now I'm going to invite Nan Toby up, who is going to light our menorah for Hanukkah.
That was a miracle. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shekiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Hanukkah. I love Hanukkah for many reasons, but I will give you my thoughts. First, those words mean, "Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, who has sustained us during this year." The lights of menorah are symbols of our joy. In times of darkness, our ancestors had courage to struggle for freedom, to worship in their own way. Let these small lights celebrate the power of resilience and the power to keep living life. In spite of all the darkness all over our world, these candles symbolize that evil has not taken over our whole world. There is comfort in gathering together, the ritual to also celebrating the universal ideas, and to validate the beauty of rituals and gratitude in our lives. Children love Hanukkah because they get little presents each night. Adults love Hanukkah because they get to eat latkes and rugula. And even for people that are not of Jewish faith, to me, lighting the menorah is one more way of keeping light in the world. There's also a dance called the Hora that we do, and every night when I light my menorahs, I think of all the people in my family that have come before me that I've loved and cherished. So it's a way of connecting to the past and bringing you back to the future. I want to quote a word by Maya Angelou, which she said, "Let nothing dim the light that shines from within. And in each of you, you have a light. Let it shine." Thank you.
And now will those on the center aisle please rise in body or spirit and form an arch for our children, and we will sing them to their classes.
pause for a time of generosity now and to receive an offering which today goes to Owl 360. I invite Kelly Parcher up to share a little bit about the organization.
Good morning, all. Thank you for having me here today. I'm Kelly Parcher. I'm the Executive Director of OWL 360. It's wonderful to see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd. I was told to have a little brief time, though I'm pretty sure Bo, as he exited the room, told me I could have 20 minutes today. So if I get crazy, just kind of give me the, whoa, slow down. I just am going to briefly kind of take you back to 2020. We're a pretty new organization, which actually formed in the middle of the pandemic, right? Because we had some time on our hands to think about what was going on, right, in the world and really here locally in our community. And one of the big struggles was housing insecurity, right? And it's a thing that our community still struggles with today. But what we really realized as an organization is that our youth were really struggling with housing insecurities. They were also really lacking that support, a space to be able to be provided an opportunity, as well as a way to access those housing services and many other supports. So that really kind of became our first driving mission as to really wanting to, right, change the trajectory of homelessness, specifically in our community. So in July of 2021, we spent that first or part of the pandemic really focusing on housing. And in July of 2021, we opened the Pfeiffer House, which is a housing program in Jefferson County. It was our organization's first venture in housing, affordable housing, and Jefferson County's really first and only housing program that was specifically for young adults, ages 18 to 25, in conjunction with supportive services. Within 2 weeks of us opening our door, our place was full, which was exciting, right? We kind of accomplished we did what we set out to do. We provided affordable housing and services for our young people. But with that, there was a long list of young people who were still unsheltered and still needed services. What we really learned in that process was, you know, you build and enable resources and young people will come. That's probably true for anybody, but what we were really aware of is our young people were actually reaching out to our organization and seeking help and support. So in the last 2 years, we really tried to focus and we're really driven on adding additional housing specifically for the young adults in our community and creating programs for even those younger. So we're really trying to change the trajectory of homelessness for that age population. I know it seems weird to talk about it because we don't see homelessness in our youth like we do in the bigger cities, but the reality is we do have them here. And so we, just in this last few weeks, I'm really excited to say that we were actually able to open our second housing program in Port Townsend. Again, that is really specifically for those young people who are on need, that ages 18 to 25, and potentially there's children. So with our 2 housing programs, we now are able to house up to 20 young adults and or their children in Jefferson County. We are kind of like we're on a 2-year cycle, if you will, which means they can be in our program, receive supportive services for 2 years, and then we really work at transitioning them into permanent housing in Jefferson County, if that's where they choose to be. I'm delighted to say we actually have a 90% success rate in putting young adults in permanent housing in our community. So yes, thank you, appreciate that. OWL 360 has been a really busy organization. Really, the Parliament House, which is our new housing program, came on the heels of the Nest. And so the Nest is really a community coffee house. We're the actually only nonprofit coffee house in Jefferson County. We like to say we're open to ages to 0 and 100 plus, right? We're an open door. We think it's really valuable to engage our community members to support our young people. But what happens inside of the Nest is really important, and I hope you all can come just really see for yourself. Our focus is to really provide resources, services, a space where young people can actually just build social capacity in a really safe environment. And we offer endless amount of services. Just to start with a few of them, we actually have mental health services outside of our organization. We offer music, art, education, tutoring supports. We open our doors to young entrepreneurs and vendors. We have a workforce development program that's in the process of really helping young people work towards career trajectory type of works and services. And then even for that younger population, like how do I just get into the job force? What are those basic skills of that? On site, we have a bunch of professional staff, all young staff, I'm excited to say, who are our coffee companions, who are trained in mental health services and allyship. We have peer allies on staff. We have youth navigation resource folks on staff, as well as program managers that really help develop what it is that young people want. They're the driver of our organization. So we have a youth and young adult advisory council. And so when they're like, this is what we want, that's really what we try to meet for them. So we're wanting to make sure we're meeting the needs of the young people, and it's just not a bunch of adults up adulting and saying, oh, I know what's good for you, but the young people really being able to have a voice in that process. I'd like to say, actually, we're super excited of what we've done in the last 11 months at the Nest. There has been over 2,300 times that young people have walked through the doors at the Nest. That may be for coffee, that may be for services, it may just to be able to meet a friend. It's just a place to hang out. Yeah, I could go on forever about that, and I know that I'll have an opportunity to chat with you all if you wish after the service today. I'll just end with a little public service announcement. Of course, the Nest has the best coffee in town, we know. But what's a really important piece is, making your coffee count. 100% of the proceeds, every time you come in and you engage in the Nest in our community, 100% of those proceeds go to support our youth and young adult programming for local youth in Jefferson County. So I think that's all I have to say. Thank you. Great to see you all.
The ushers will come among you now to receive the offering, and additional ways for giving are projected.
The poet William Blake wrote, "Joy and woe are woven fine, clothing for the soul divine. Under every grief and pine runs a joy with silken twine." This time we set aside to share joys and sorrows. We recognize that our personal joys and sorrows are only a fragment of the joys and sorrows of the larger community of life. And thus we place this first stone, thinking in particular we light a candle of joy for all who joined us at the holiday party on Friday night. There was good company, fun crafts and laughter all around. Sorry to have missed it. We place a final stone, holding in our hearts the joys and sorrows, but also thinking of such joys and sorrows among us that are unexpressed, but of no less importance. Our first reading today is from A Week on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers by Henry David Thoreau. Shad were formerly abundant here, taken in weirs by the Indians until the dam at Billerica and the factories at Lowell put an end to their migrations hitherward. Perchance, after a few thousands of years, if the fishes will be patient and pass their summers elsewhere, meanwhile nature will have leveled the Billerica Dam and the Lowell factories, and the river run clear again to be explored by new migratory shoals. Poor shad, where is thy redress? When nature gave thee instinct, gave she thee the heart to bear thy fate, armed with no sword, only with innocence and a just cause. I, for one, am with thee, and who knows what may avail a crowbar against the Billerica Dam? Away with the superficial and selfish philanthropy of men. Who knows what admirable virtue of fishes may be bearing up against a hard destiny, not admired by that fellow creature who alone can appreciate it? Who hears the fishes when they cry?
Today's second reading is from Hope in the Dark by Rebecca Solnit. Americans are good at the mingled complacency and despair that says that things cannot change, will not change, and we do not have the power to change them. You'd have to be an amnesiac or at least ignorant of history and even current events to fail to see that our country and our world have always been changing. And in the midst of great and terrible changes, and are occasionally changed through the power of popular will and idealistic movements. Climate now demands we summon up the force to leave behind the age of fossil fuel. May 200 years hence, someone hold a document from 2019 in their hand in wonder because it was written when the revolution had taken hold and all the old inevitabilities had been swept aside, when we seized hold of possibility and made it ours. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings, said Ursula Le Guin. It's the hardest and best work we could ever do. Now, everything depends on it.
Thank you so much. Well, it's been a few years since I've spoken from this podium, but I'm pleased to be invited back. And, who knew that we would be dividing our lifetimes in reference to a global pandemic, pre-COVID, post-COVID. It's interrupted a lot of things, but I'm so glad that we are reconvening in our places of worship and reconnecting with one another face to face. My sermon this morning, Walden in the Anthropocene. On my way to the annual gathering of the Thoreau Society in Concord this past summer, I overheard a conversation between two women. One, a younger woman from Phoenix, the other, an older woman living in Seattle. Phoenix, you will recall, was experiencing a heat wave with temperatures above 110 degrees. The older woman was commiserating with the younger one. That heat must be unbearable, she said. Oh, it's not always like this, the younger woman replied. Besides, it's dry heat, and we had a wet spring this year. I say this to illustrate that people often minimize the threats of weather-related events. How else to explain why people continue to flock to places like Florida and Arizona? Now that smoke from fires in Canada has blanketed eastern states, people there have come to understand what those of us out west have had to contend with. But once the smoke clears, many wonder what the fuss was all about. Apparently, the threat only becomes existential when it's your home that's at risk of fire or flood. The theme of this year's annual gathering was Thoreau and the politics of extinction, which seemed appropriate considering what's been happening all around us. In 2019, 1 million species of plants and animals were at risk of extinction. Here where we are in the Northwest, the continued existence of the southern resident orcas is threatened by the decline of Chinook salmon in the Salish Sea. Elsewhere, trees are dying en masse from fungal infections and invasive insects. Monarch butterflies are endangered for lack of milkweed on their annual migration northward. The list goes on and on. The causes vary, not only from global warming, pollution, overharvesting, and urban development, but also from greed, ignorance, neglect, and political failure. The one common denominator is humanity. Many respected scientists, some of them Nobel Prize winners, have concluded that we are now living in a new geological epoch, the Anthropocene, the age of humans. This is the recognition that there is no part of nature that is unaffected by human activity. Geologists distinguish epochs on the basis of changes in the Earth's atmosphere, oceans, and sediments detected years hence in planetary strata. Two recent movies, Barbie and Oppenheimer, illustrate what will be shown to be significant markers of the Anthropocene: plastic and radioactivity. Most seem to date this new epoch from the rise of the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. Others date it from the beginning of agriculture thousands of years before. Still others from the 1950s and the great acceleration that followed. Now, the notion of the Anthropocene is not universally accepted, however. There are some who argue that it is premature and presumptuous of us to declare that we have entered a new geological epoch based on little or no evidence in the fossil record. The very idea smacks of hubris and anthropocentrism. But the fact is that there is no part of nature that has not been affected by human beings. And for better or worse, the future of nature and our continued existence on this planet is now in our hands. To say this is not to imply the end of nature. Nature will continue whether we are here or not. Nor is the term predictive of any particular outcome, good or bad. But it does indicate that human activities have permanently altered life on Earth, and that we have left traces in the geological record that will persist far into the future, whether or not their impact results in another instance of mass extinction. Whatever happens, we will have only ourselves to thank or blame. Which will it be? Given the enormity of the challenges that we face, how can a man who went off to the woods for 2 years, woods he almost burned down himself a year earlier, tell us anything about the Anthropocene, global warming, and the threat of extinction? And what advice can someone who was born 200 years ago offer to the living today? In many ways, Henry David Thoreau was prophetic. He was born at the beginning of the industrial age. He witnessed the profound transformation of society brought about by the rise of capitalism and the invention of the steam engine. As he said of so-called modern improvements in Walden, there is an illusion about them. There is not always a positive advance. Our inventions are wont to be pretty toys, which distract our attention from serious things. They are but improved means to an unimproved end. Like nuclear weapons and artificial intelligence, such questionable improvements outpace our ability to anticipate their consequences and rein them in. In light of the damage done to the environment as a result of deforestation, the damming of rivers, and the extinction of species, which were happening all around him, he was led to ask, what use is a house if you don't have a tolerable planet to put it on? I think there are several things Thoreau can tell us if we're willing to listen. His first and most important message is that in order to save the earth, we must love it. As he wrote, "You must love the crust of the earth on which you dwell more than the sweet crust of any bread or cake." He had empathy with all living things, or what biologist E.O. Wilson called biophilia. A good example of this is the passage I read earlier from A Week on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers. "Poor shad," he wrote, "where is thy redress? When nature gave thee instinct, gave she thee the heart to bear thy fate? To the shad only, armed with innocence and a just cause, he said, I for one am with thee, and who knows what may avail a crowbar against the Bellerica Dam?" Our philanthropy should include the fishes as well as human beings. Who hears them when they cry? The prospect of extinction of species took a toll on Thoreau's mental health and self-respect. When I consider that the nobler animals have been exterminated here, the cougar, the panther, lynx, wolverine, wolf, bear, moose, deer, the beaver, the turkey, I cannot but feel as if I lived in a tamed and, as it were, emasculated country, he wrote in his journal. For him, nature was not a resource to be exploited, but preserved and maintained. It is a life-enhancing panacea. He viewed it as a remedy for what today we call nature deficit disorder. He advocated setting aside natural areas for education and spiritual renewal. In another journal entry, he wrote, "What are the natural features which make a township handsome? A river with its waterfalls and meadows, a lake, a hill, a cliff, or individual rocks, a forest, and ancient trees standing singly. Such things are beautiful. They have a high use which dollars and cents never represent. If the inhabitants of a town were wise, they would seek to preserve these things, though at considerable expense. For such things educate far more than any hired teachers or preachers or at present educational system." On Bainbridge Island, where I live, we have over 50 parks, hiking trails, and nature preserves. The local land trust has preserved almost 1,500 acres of land, most of which is open to the public. And Islandwood provides outdoor learning experience for 25,000 students a year coming from 50 school districts. Similar efforts are happening elsewhere. Another important lesson Thoreau teaches us is sustainability. He built his cabin at Walden Pond himself with recycled wood and other materials he found nearby. He constructed his fireplace and chimney with stones from around the pond. He was mostly a vegetarian, eating fruits and vegetables he grew in his own gardens. At any given time, he had only one coat and one pair of pants. When his boots wore out, he had them resoled. He believed in living beneath one's means rather than above them. That is to say, in maximizing one's pleasures by minimizing one's wants. As he wrote in Walden, his how-to guide in simple living, most of the luxuries and many of the so-called comforts of life are not only not indispensable, but positive hindrances to the elevation of mankind. None can be an impartial or wise observer of human life, but from the vantage ground of what we should call voluntary poverty. When we have obtained those things that are necessary to life, there is another alternative than to obtain the superfluities, and that is to adventure on life now, our vacation from humbler toil having commenced. At our present rates of consumption of water and the production of greenhouse gases, we are headed for disaster. Obviously, we need to harness human will and technical skill, collectively and individually, to avert tragedy. While none of us can solve these problems by ourselves, each of us can contribute to the solution by limiting our impact on the environment through recycling and reusing, avoiding waste of food and water, lessening our consumption of meat, getting rid of plastic, and using alternative sources of energy. Now that I'm older and retired, I find that my own life is not only more simplified, but also more enriched by experiences I had less time for when I worked. Reading, writing, time spent in the out of doors, and with friends and loved ones. There is indeed an alternative to consumerism and overwork, and that is to adventure on life now while there is still time. A third message Thoreau has for us is to pay attention. As he wrote in Walden, "For many years I was self-appointed inspector of snowstorms and rainstorms, and did my duty faithfully." His journal, amounting to more than 2 million words, is as much an account of his observations of nature as it is of his thoughts. He carefully examined the course and currents of the Assabet, Sudbury, and Concord rivers, which he charted on a 7-foot map. He also kept a meticulous calendar of seasonal phenomena, in which he noted, among other things, the daily weather, the first flowering of flowers and bushes, the annual return of migrating birds, and so on. In addition, he studied and wrote about the succession of forest trees and the dispersion of seeds. Thoreau had a ringside seat in witnessing the onset of the Anthropocene epoch. His work is recognized as a valuable baseline account on the basis of which contemporary biologists and ecologists have determined that the arrival of spring occurs weeks earlier today than it did then, that birds and animals common then are now gone, and that development has significantly encroached on natural habitat. He would be shocked at the extent to which climate change has impacted the environment. We are living in a dark time. Not since the Civil War has the survival of democracy been so threatened as it is today. Racism, inequality, and homelessness eat away at our social fabric. Looming over these is the specter of climate change, coming faster and more devastating than previously imagined. Although it seems unavoidable, I do not believe it is inevitable. There are grounds for hope. Rebecca Solnit, author of the book Hope in the Dark, says hope is not the belief that everything was or will be fine. The evidence is all around us of tremendous suffering and destruction. The hope I'm interested in is about broad perspectives with specific possibilities, ones that invite or demand that we act. It is also not a sunny everything is getting better narrative, though it may be a counter to the everything is getting worse one. You could call it an account of complexities and uncertainties with openings. Solnit calls our attention to the tremendous human rights achievements of the past half-century and of the rise of new forms of resistance enabled by innovative ways of communicating, organizing, and forming alliances across distances and difference. Hope, she says, locates itself in the premises that we don't know what will happen, and that in the spaciousness of uncertainty is room to act. It is an embrace of the unknown and unknowable, a glimmer of light in the darkness. Change is not assured, but pessimism is fatal. There's yet another message Thoreau has for us. He too lived in difficult times. In a symbolic but fateful act, he famously spent a night in jail for refusing to pay the local tax. The reverberations of a speech he gave in defense of his action were felt in the civil rights movement and in a speech Martin Luther King gave in Washington, D.C. 60 years ago. As the struggle for abolition of slavery intensified, Thoreau was moved to write, "The remembrance of my country spoils my walk. My thoughts are murder to the state and voluntarily go plotting against her." But he never succumbed to despair or ceased believing, as he once wrote, that surely joy is the condition of life. He used the word surely in recognition that, in spite of evidence to the contrary, joy is the condition of life. Joy is the antidote to despair. If we lose joy, we lose everything. Thank you. Now, in the mid-1980s, a group of religious educators in the Northwest came together at Fort Worden to write a new curriculum for the Unitarian Universalist Association. It was published finally in 1990 under the title In Our Hands. It was a peace and justice curriculum, but obviously it is also a curriculum dealing with issues we face today with extinction and global warming. And we took an old song and put some new words to it, and we're going to sing that this morning as our closing hymn.
We've got the whole world in our hands. 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 We've got the mountains and the meadows in our hands. We've got the mountains and the meadows in our hands. We've got the mountains and the meadows in our hands. We've got the whole world in our hands. We've got the oceans and the farmlands in our hands. We've got the oceans and the farmlands in our hands. We've got the ocean and the farmlands in our hands. We've got the whole world in our hands. We've got the whales and the sparrows in our hands. We've got the whales and the sparrows in our hands. We've got the whales and the sparrows in our hands. We've got the whole world in our hands. We've got our families and our neighbors in our hands. We've got the families and our neighbors in our hands. We've got our families and our neighbors in our hands. We've got the whole world in our hands.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, my closing words are also from Henry David Thoreau. If you live the life which you have imagined, you will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put the foundations under them. Okay. We extinguish our flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, or the power of transformation. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.